Xenoblade Chronicles X is a decade old, and it remains significantly more ambitious and larger than any of its competitors that have come out since, right? This is a game that has more content than something like Starfield or Fallout 4 or any other open world RPG that's come out since then. You know, games like Red Dead 2, Horizon Mini Ons. The list goes on and on and on. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a decade old and far surpasses all of those games with its size and with its scope. Okay, Xenoblade Chronicles X was a huge deal when it came out among fans, but this was a title that was very successfully damage controlled at the time. This was, of course, a Wii U exclusive during the height of like the anti-Nintendo hysteria. This was a title that was like heavily downplayed. You know, Xenoblade fans like came out against it. People ranted and raved and called the IP doomed. Right? This was supposed to be like one of the biggest failures for Nintendo in the decade, right? It was supposed to be this big, massive, like epic blunder. If it wasn't for the success of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, we would never have gotten a new Xenoblade game. But obviously, all of this was a cope, right? In reality, Xenoblade Chronicles X was a super beloved title. People really enjoy it. It has cultivated a cult audience over the years and has remained an extremely popular Wii U game. You know, one of many iconic exclusives on the title, right? Xenoblade Chronicles X had a ton of fans who appreciated it for what it was and understood that this game was a monument to what Monolith Soft was capable of, right? They had surpassed Bethesda with this release. And even 10 years later, that's still true. But what really gets me about this, like looking at the situation now, uh, the gaming journalism industry is not going to be able to downplay the game this time. This is the major takeaway I have from this re-release. Like seeing just how enthusiastic people are about it, seeing like people who have played the game talk about it to people who haven't, right? Like seeing gaming journalists scramble, seeing like the Spurgs try and justify like why they're upset about the censorship, right? Like seeing like all this is happening, like the gaming journals are not going to be able to downplay this game they did like when it first came out, right? That's the takeaway I'm getting from this to begin with, because not only has Xenoblade become a much more popular IP over the years, X in particular has become one of those elusive Nintendo classics that just isn't available on any other platform. Anybody who says they emulate this game on PC is lying to you. X was one of those titles that really, really stood out to a lot of people. And it's been something that people have been asking for a really, really, really long time. And now that we're getting it, we're seeing firsthand just how enthusiastic people are about it. And because the game has already seen release, game journals are not able to downplay the title this time because actual fans have already got their hands on it. So when they try and come out and do their thing, when they try and downplay the game and come after it and make something up and release some statements about it or do something, like they are just going to be completely and irrevocably BTFO by people who actually know what they're talking about, right? Like there's nothing that the gaming journalism industry is going to be able to do to downplay this release. And this is so interesting to me because this is a game that's a decade old. And yet it's still so successful, still so popular, and so iconic. And I think the perfect demonstration as to why downplaying Nintendo games like Super Mario Bros. Wonder and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Fire Emblem Engage and another Code R and a Unicorn Over. Well, that's not a Nintendo exclusive, but like when you look at all of these games, right? When you look at like Super Princess Peach Showtime, when you look at all of these games and see how the gaming journalism industry came out and tried to downplay them, tried to like make them out like they were no big deal, that nobody liked them, that nobody enjoyed them, right? When we saw this aggressive, just push to kind of write off these games as just being nothing special and nothing worth talking about, The reality is these games are getting fans who love the games, who support them, and will absolutely support sequels and re-releases, right? Like this has been happening all the time with re-releases of games like Star Fox 64 3D and Skyward Sword and the Link's Awakening remake, the Luigi's Mansion port, right? Like we've seen this happen all generation long. Is that a lot of these games that had very tepid reputations critically have re-released and become wildly successful. Occasionally, finding new fans and becoming huge, massive success stories in their own right. You know, the team behind Echoes of Wisdom got their start producing Zelda remakes. You know, Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D, the Link's Awakening one, right? Grezzo has made a name for themselves doing that, and now they produce their own really great Zelda title, right? Again, you can't downplay Ocarina of Time. You can't downplay Majora's Mask. Actually, Majora's Mask is another example of a game that was heavily downplayed when it first came out, only to become extremely popular later. You cannot stop people from playing and appreciating these games. Is the essence of what I'm getting is the essence of what I'm getting at. Right? Like these games remain good no matter how much they sell, what the Metacritic score says, what the fanboys say, right? No matter what happens, these games are always, always, always going to find their audience. And Xenoblade Chronicles X is a really good example of how a supposed Wii U failure is just going to come back and explode onto the scene 10 years later, right? This is the perfect example as to why downplaying Nintendo games is doomed to failure, right? It just is not going to work at all, right? You are not going to be able to compete with actual, real, genuine fans who know what they're talking about. You cannot obsessively hate any Nintendo product hard enough to get people to stop caring about it. And that's kind of what we've been seeing over the past several years with people trying to gaslight you into thinking Ocarina of Time sucks or that New Super Mario Bros. Is a bad game. In spite of what all of these people try and say, the reality is that all of these games are super popular and super successful. Right? How much did we see? How many movie critics came out and spoke out against the Super Mario Bros. Movie, even though it was phenomenally successful and popular, right? Again, it was objectively better than the stuff that people were hyping up at the time, namely the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and the Barbie one. But good luck seeing the gaming the critics acknowledge that, right, for political reasons. But again, we are seeing this is a sign of the times, right? This is an example of just how the gaming industry is just never ever going to downplay Nintendo to the same extent that they did in the 90s because of the advent of digital distribution, because of re-releases and remakes, because of the sheer vast of games that are already available. You aren't going to be able to gaslight people into thinking that Nintendo has no games ever again, right? That's a claim that should get you laughed at in this day and age. And I don't think anybody really seriously tries to argue that because of how ridiculous it sounds. But this is an example as to why. This is an example as to how something like Xenoblade Chronicles X can be successfully downplayed, can be hated, can be despised by critics, can be successfully written off for years and then out of nowhere become a major hit, right? This is one of the many, many, many reasons why Nintendo is not going to go anywhere. All of their old stuff that is already good can easily be resold to you at full price, and you will still get a better product than what you would get by paying their competitors.